Okay, we're back. I just had a little coffee there. So now, get set up. Okay. The right-hand side of the slide talks about archetypes. You wondered how to pronounce that word? It's archetypes. And what are archetypes? These are patterns that are found in many different cultures and times. What are archetypes? Patterns that are found in many different cultures and times. Now, when you start to look at myth, not just one myth, but all these different myths, what you'll start to see are the same story with different details. And this is what's called an archetype. And the little diagram here, this is a specific archetype which is called the journey of the hero. And you might have heard about the journey of the hero in ELA, in English class, in high school. So what happens with the journey of the hero? That top box, this is when the hero leaves his or her society to undertake a quest. And what is a quest? It's not going to buy low to get a gallon of milk. A quest is something that is really hard to do, and it's important to do. So the hero leaves his or her society to undertake a quest. We travel down to that next block. During the journey, the hero experiences trials and tribulations. Hero experiences trials and tribulations, meaning that, is it easy on the quest? No. Then moving down, okay, the hero experiences either literally and or figuratively a descent into the underworld. The underworld could be going underwater, could be going underground into a cave. There's lots of different ways to descend into the underworld. But remember, we have the hero, and heroes are always successful. So moving back up out of the down part of our diagram, the hero is successful, and then continuing to the next, the hero returns to society with a gift. And there's different types of gifts. The gift could be monetary in the form of treasure. It could be in the form of wisdom, knowledge, or it could be a spiritual gift. All those different types of gifts. Now, how is this an archetype? Well, we could use the same passageway here for Jesus of Nazareth, right? Jesus had a quest. What was his quest? To save all mankind. Jesus experienced trials and tribulations when he was on earth, descended into the underworld, right? Being buried, descending into hell, was ultimately successful and gave the gift of salvation for us all, which is wonderful. We could take this and apply it to Moses. What was his quest, right? Remember from earlier we talked about when Moses went down into Egypt to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. It was not easy. It was hard for Moses to do it because Pharaoh had a steadfast heart. His heart would have been hardened. But Moses was successful. What was the gift? Freedom. Right? The promised land. In case you're curious, we could take the same archetype, apply it to Buddhism, as well as Islam. Now, when people hear this and they think, are you saying, Mr. K, that Jesus, Moses, Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad are all the same person? Nope, I'm not. But if you strip away the details, then what you'll see is the narrative story's the same. And then when you look at that pattern, that's what we call archetype. Now we can combine symbolism and archetype, combine them, and then we get archetypal symbols. So archetypal symbols, these would be symbols that we find in archetypes, these stories that are found throughout many different cultures and times, many different myths. And the perfect example of an archetypal symbol is the mountain, right? The mountain. For instance, in Judaism, Moses goes up onto the mountain to get the Torah, the Ten Commandments, and then comes back down. Jesus gave his most influential sermon, his most important sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, did you ever think about that? Mount is short for mountain, right? Same thing with the Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad used to go up into the mountains to pray. Wow, so here we have this again. Now, why does this happen with the mountain? Well, mountains are physically closer to the heavens, closer to God. So when people elevate themselves, this is how they get closer to the sacred. So this is what we call archetypal symbols. So we have all these things working inside of myth. And you might be able to tell that I really, really enjoy talking about myth. I love this chapter, the languages of religion. So now, the next slide deals with sacred history. And again, sacred history, there's elements within these stories that are historical. In other words, they're within time and space, and they're provable to some degree. But they have this mixed inside of here, things that are really, really fantastic and wonderful. For example here, the image on this slide, this is from the story of finding the baby Moses and the bulrushes, right? Remember that? So there's certain details of sacred history that are beyond proof, but the overall framework is provable and fixed within a certain time frame. And the reason why we have sacred history is that these stories are told to inspire us and to make select people, certain persons and events in their lives larger than life and beyond the ordinary. In other words, it's to make things transmundane, right? That to break away from our ordinary day-to-day lives by having things that are larger than life. And this is why we get heroes in the true and proper sense within these mythic stories that are dropped down into history and make history sacred, for not only to have us, believe that story a little bit more, which is partly true, but it's to make these people objects that we follow their patterns in their lives. So the next slide talks about parables. Now, these parables were flat out stories that were told. They involve realistic events and characters, but the events in the story did not occur. So in the previous slide we talked about the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, when Jesus of Nazareth told that story, he was not relating something that had actually happened. That was a story that Jesus had made up to teach a lesson. Now, Jesus of Nazareth, throughout history, is widely regarded as one of the best parable teachers of human history. There were others. For example, the Greek philosopher Plato, he also taught using parables. If you've ever read Aesop's fables when you were little, those are also parables. So again, parables, these are stories. They're not meant to be taken literally, but they're meant to teach moral lessons spiritual truths as well as philosophical truths. So this is parables. This is another part of the languages of religion, another narrative style that we find inside of myths. So we'll continue talking about the languages of religion with the next lecture.